All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Tuesday, May 18th. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. This video is for education purposes only. If the screen is blurry, it is because YouTube has not finished rendering the high-def version. Just wait a little bit, and it will take care of itself. They do take sometimes half an hour before the video is completely rendered in high def and it's not fuzzy. All right, so let's talk about today's price action. Well, not great. I mean, it felt like just a lot of chop. I was, basically around, midday. I kind of just had given up on some things. So I had put some trades on in the beginning of the day to kind of play this little bit of a bounce that we got in growth names, and to have have some positions on in case these things really ran for the day, because I'm kind of underexposed in the growth area in my trading account. So I put on a couple trades that I've been that you've heard me probably talk about in the videos a little bit, and just sat with them and said, just be really disciplined with them. VIX finishes over 21, not the best look for that. My rule is basically be a bit more defensive when the VIX is over 20. Also, be more defensive when the VIX is less than the 50-day moving average, which we'll get to that in just a second. But I think right now, even when it's kind of slow days like this, because even though we got off to a nice start, there was some small cap growth names that were doing very, very well in the beginning of the day, some of which off of a couple upgrades, and just overall the group was acting very well in the first hour of the day, but then it kind of things kind of settled in, and we weren't really going anywhere. When it's quiet, I try to really kind of think about things and strategy and positioning, and try to come up with some rules. Refresh your rules. Everybody should have some trading rules, but to try to even tweak those a little bit, to the circumstances that are at hand. My rule, right, I was talking about this in the trading room a little while ago, was just that, I've kind of beefed up my cash balance in my trading account, for about the last, I think about the last week and a half, really is where I kind of said, hey, make sure that you've, keeping a bigger cash balance. And some of those rules that are in play for me is, dictated by the Qs less than the 50-day moving average, and just a lot of sideways price action, and to kind of put those things in context. So yeah, the VIX over 20, Qs below the 50-day moving average, obviously a little bit more sideways chop. Just some of the things that we're experiencing just tell me to be a little bit more defensive. So I'll have a band, right, which I talked about in the room about what the allocation will be, and depending if I'm seeing some good setups. I think another rule right now is, well, it's not necessarily a rule, but yesterday I had a nice trading day and made some money. Today I was basically up a little bit to flat to down a little bit. I finished the day down a little bit, but over the 2 days, still positive. So, you always want to try to, in this game, secure some profits, even if they're not a lot. Right now with this tape, I think this tape has been very difficult. It hasn't been very consistent, right? Sometimes we get one day and then we don't really get any follow through. It's really selling on the green days and not adding. I know sometimes when everything is kind of green for the day, we start to see some really good setups, right? Because things start to come out of consolidation or bases and so forth, but you really have to have another level of discipline right now in this tape. All right, so let's talk about a couple of those things. I don't have a ton of charts to go over today. I put some option activity that we saw. I'll go over a few charts, but so this is obviously the 5-minute bar that I'm looking at for the day. Notice today, we just didn't look right kind of going into the open today, right? We just began to kind of, we were giving back profits since around like the European Open, right? Europe did the same thing. Europe was strong on the Open, and they gave back a lot of their gains for the day, right? So if you want to look at what Europe did, right, sometimes you get a little bit of a hint by this, but you could see this range right here, right? So they started on the highs of their session, and did exactly kind of what we did, with a little bit more of a spill at the end of the day. But this is where we were. When I got I get in, between 7 o'clock and 7:15 in the morning, and first thing I started to see was the VIX kind of move up a little bit. So that was a little bit of an indication that maybe people had some selling to do today. All right, so that's what the S&P looked like. Now, when you zoom back out and look at the 1-hour chart, it's not all that bad. We're basically, again, we're just in a very sideways pattern. Notice this is one of the things that we talked about pre-market today. Every day I send out members a S&P roadmap email and some charts of the day, and we talked about this 4166 level would be kind of a pivot level for the day. We had got to the top of value, but really couldn't get too far away from it, and so we're just kind of back in this sideways range, leaning down. So we're also below this this big line that I've got in here, right? That's a 200 period moving average. I tend to look at that to see if we're in a short-term uptrend or short-term downtrend, right? Different than the daily chart. Obviously, S&P is still very much in a very nice-looking uptrend, but short-term, right? I like to look at this 1-hour 200 period moving average, and we're going back and forth over it, up, down, up, down, up, down. So it's a lot of sideways chop. A couple levels to watch to the downside. Would be 40.74. Also, we move out to we're doing this backwards. Usually you should start at the longer term. Sometimes, if I'm just concentrating on the short term for the day, that's why we're doing it. We're going backwards. We're looking at the longer time frame first. But also 41.02. That would be your first level of support, right? So we had this bounce last week. Yesterday, kind of, this isn't really a doji candle, but, a little bit of indecision on the day. And, we'll see how this goes tomorrow. But, it's just what it is what it is in terms of this sideways type pattern that we're getting. It's also, I would say, dull, right? And if we look at, before we go to the Qs, because the Qs look different, but I would say while this is dull, remember what one of those rules that you hear in trading from time to time: don't short a dull market. And right now, for the S&P, I'm not sure I would want to short or just have a lot of long positions either. Right now, we're in value for the month, right? That to me is range bound, as our indicator says, and choppy, range bound and choppy. So again, that should dictate, in my opinion, how you're thinking about your positioning. Certainly does for me. Qs. Well, we took out this downside VPOC last week, and we rallied up to the 50-day moving average, and we just can't get above it. So again, it's one of those things. My main indicator is the MarketWebs that I look at, volume at price, but I also have the moving averages on here because they're important, because everybody makes decisions based. A lot of institutional traders, while a lot of institutional managers, most of them are not technicians, right? They're more fundamental. Still, they look at some of the basics, like the 200-day moving average and the 50-day moving average, and you could see, right, we're being capped here by the 50-day moving average. So that's a little bit of a rejection. Note that the Qs were higher for most of the day. Let's see what they look like on the 1 hour. Not that big of a move, even though they were moving a little bit faster than the S&P today, but also could not stay long above value, and now back into the value area. And then you'll have some support down here at 316. Notice we did not take out that VPOC last week on the 1 hour. We did take that out on the Qs and the daily, but we didn't take it out on the 1 hour, which is kind of interesting to me. Let's go over to IWM. IWM to me, now we talked about how we took this out at in the overnight session, right? This IWM VPOC, but this is also back inside value, right? And really looking sideways, clinging right now to the bottom of value. There was also, by the way, these VPOCs are just really interesting tags. Right, there was also this one that was taken out in the overnight session as well. Wow, looks like we're still selling off here a little bit. Now down 1% on the session. So, what else for the day? We'll talk about some sectors here. Clean energy. My philosophy on this move that we saw in growth today, because growth did outperform even though it was down. I think, until price action returns in the Qs and in growth land above the 50-day moving average, my what I think to do is best, and I know that this is not exciting to people, and it's kind of, I think, the last thing that some traders want to hear from me, but I said this about it a little more than an hour after the open. I said, if you got trapped in some growth names, it's a great day to kind of sell the rip, right? Like a snowflake, right? A snowflake was up like 4% or 5%, 5% for the day. Like, to me, this is a great day to sell the rip. Right, this is a name that is now coming up to the, you could see what it does at the 50-day moving average, right? But it's still underneath the value area too, right? So a nice move off the lows like that, I think is a great place to sell, right? You want to be, I hate to say this to some people because they don't, I know that this is, again, the last thing that growth investors sometimes want to hear, but Snowflake is in a downtrend. Right now, there's no 200 period moving average, but it's rallying up to the 50-day moving average. Right, this could be a good short for the next couple days. Might be something that I might be looking to do. Right, we'll see if it gets rejected there. Right, a couple of traders have been doing this really well with things like Peloton. Right, this Peloton got rejected and was a nice short yesterday. Right, nice rally up to the what is that, 20-day moving average, as well as the bottom of value, and made for a nice short yesterday, right? Even though it was up 3% for the day. So again, I am a trend trader. So until things retake the trend, I'm much more cognizant of selling things as they approach their resistance until they actually prove it. All right, so this could be could set up for a short for Snowflake for tomorrow. All right, we'll have to see. Couple names, I'll go through some of the names, and we'll talk about a couple names. One price action that I liked today was in C Limited. This name started, went down, tested the bottom of value for the day. All right, went all the way down to almost 200. And rallied all the way back. So we'll watch this one for tomorrow. And you got a level to trade against, which is 224, right? Can know exactly where to get out of it. All right. So yeah, and then the other thing that I find difficult for me right now. I mentioned in the beginning of the video that I'm a little bit underexposed in growth, which I think is perfectly legitimate because many of them are below the 50-day moving average, including the Qs. How many times have I said that in this video? And the problem that I'm having is when I trade these things, I don't really have a lot of conviction in them. So I got into a couple trades, like Upstart, which I'm still holding, and I did take a couple targets. I got a little bit cute with this name today. I bought some around the open. I had to chase a little bit. I did get a target, and then I added back in here, and then I got another target at the end of the day, which was good. So, and that's what sometimes too these days are for, more day trading. But I did hang on to some of that. Took off my ad here. right? Roku was one name too that I jumped in. There was some calls in this one. Where'd this thing close? Yeah, I actually would have done okay with it. I looked at it a little bit afterwards. I'm like, I could have kept that position on. But I wanted to get into Roku is not like a name that was high on my list for the day. Oh, I did okay with this, 328. Oh, it did go up a little bit higher. It did go up a little bit higher. Yeah, I was a little bit late. That's what concerned me. I got into this. It wasn't a name on my list that I was going to trade. I saw some aggressive calls that hit the tape, and I said, okay, let me join in on this. And I realized, I'm like, damn, this thing's already up close to 3% for the day. So that's why I decided to like get out of it and find something else. Because I've been looking at this U. I call it the U, like college football. If you know what team I'm referring to, the U. So again, this thing has a lot of work to do. So it's really difficult for me to stay in something like this. Even though I know the fundamental story with this, with Unity software, but it is still so buried in a downtrend that I need to see it get above. I would like to see it above 104, right, which is another $15 higher. But here's the thing always with a lot of traders that are trading fundamental and not looking at the technicals is if I get into this, right, I want to ride the trend, right? I want to be in it probably for a while, rather than selling it at the bottom of value, which is resistance. Right, so here would be the game plan for this name, right? If it gets back above like where it really failed at this 106 level, let's say I enter at 106 and I've got my stop at 103. I'll try to ride this thing all the way up to the to the VPOC and maybe further, right? So that's the bigger picture. So I don't mind waiting for it and being patient for it to prove itself, right? That it can get back into an uptrend. Right? Let these things prove it to you rather than in my opinion, it's just a better strategy than trying to like time because you think you're a great trader trying to time the absolute bottom. Let these things work for you, right? Let them prove it to you, right? Instead of being egotistical trying to call the absolute bottom in these things, which is what many traders are trying to do and have gotten really hurt over the last couple months, trying to say, hey, I can call the bottom. I know it's cheap. It's cheap down here, right? I know. Well, that's a really bad philosophy to have right now in this market. Last year, you could do that kind of thing, right? Everything was working. This year, you gotta, you gotta be a little bit different than that. All right, so that's why I walk through all my trades, every night. Full transparency. This builder was one that I talked about. I didn't like the look of this thing, and I think I made the right decision, right? So I was looking for this thing to get back to the top of value. It took out a VPOC yesterday, but just could not. It tried to go higher today, and once it failed, I said, and it got back to my cost basis. So that's another rule right now. If you're going to try names, it doesn't just have to be the growth names, but if they start to work for you, and they go back to your cost basis, it's a good, even though you may have set a different stop price, you could always get out back where you entered and then just go ahead and watch, because you could always get back in, right? As long as you're pretty objective, right, and can adjust to some things. Also, XLE was a name that I got out of. I tried going into ARC-G, right, which we saw a lot of call positioning. I'm like, hey, maybe this thing runs for a little bit. Again, just wasn't acting strong enough for me. I took one target and then, right, a small target, right, which is sometimes like I got it, like right now in this market in the growth names, I got to get that first target in, even if it's just a couple bucks away. I just feel like you got to lock something in because half these things just revert back. So that's it, guys. There was a nice XLV call buyer on the tape. Um, I like this group of stocks right now, even though this is a little bit extended. This made such a nice move back in the beginning of April, but it's still, it's as long as it stays above value for the month and continues to kind of grind higher, that trade will work. All right. There's also a big trade in KWeb today too. Just a tough, again, looks like so many of these growth charts broken down. Bouncing off the VPOC, which is fine, but somebody put up an awful lot of January calls. I think they were the January 80 calls. Let's see. I think about 7,000 or so traded. Hefty premium because they didn't go too far out of the money. It's a total of 7,700 of the January 80 strike calls, right? Which is up here, interesting, right around that VPOC. But it's a long time till January. So even though I don't like the name below the 200-day moving average, options is an easy way to kind of take a shot on something where you can only lose the premium. All right, guys, that is it. Mention a couple names, and just have to kind of take this market one day at a time, and really, stick to your rules. Make sure that you're adjusting your rules a little bit, and not getting over the tips of your skis with risk right now. Until we start to see the technicals shape up a little bit. And I'll tell you, that just takes some time, right? Just to have a little bit of a bigger perspective, which I also try to share in these videos. Realizing that the S&P is still up nicely for the year. But make sure that you kind of just look at this year as being different than last year, and tackle this problem in a different way than you tackled last year, right? And it's a slower pace, right? So I sometimes during the trading hours, was a couple of things that I've said sometimes is like, hey, if it's going to be a slow day, if it's nice outside, take a break, get a little bit of exercise in, right? And return and be fresh for this market, right? Because it's not easy when we go sideways like this to remain fresh. All right, guys. But if you're a full-time trader. All right, guys. Have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.